It's 5:30. I'd like to call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. We have a quorum. Is anyone registered for public comment?
No.
I want to make a couple of announcements. First of all, I'd like to welcome Costello and Lily Berger. Welcome. I hope you enjoy our meeting. For those of you who are not familiar with how we operate, I'm going to explain. The first thing we will do when we get to public hearings at 5:45 is take up what we call a consent agenda. At that point, I take up all the items that are non-controversial, no one insists on speaking on, and we dispose of them with one motion. Those of you who are here on those motions, you will be on your way very shortly. Then we deal with the more contentious issues and take whatever time is required. I also want to point out that you are not required to sit on the sides. If you wish to sit in the last couple of rows, you're free to do so. You can see better there, but it's totally your choice. And finally, please turn off your phones. Are there communications, disclosures, or recusals? Mr. Rowe.
I'll be here at the March 5th meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else? I actually have two. On items 5 and 6, one of the principles of urban land is a friend. It will not affect anything I do on this. And on item 12, which relates to Exact Sciences, my family owns some stock in Exact Sciences, and that also will not affect anything I do on that item. With that, I will move on to minutes of the February 5th meeting. Is there a motion, Mr. Cantrell? Seconded by Mr. Oath. Discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. A schedule of meetings. We have regular meetings on March 5th and 19th and April 2nd and 23rd, plus special work sessions on Monday, March 12th and Thursday, April 12th. Make note of those. Routine business. Item 1, Legistar 50252. Adopting a relocation order for the acquisition of land interests required for the construction and maintenance of a new public storm sewer within a parcel located at 4009 Hammersley Road. And item 2, Legistar 50369, authorizing the city to execute an underground electric easement to WP&L to occupy a portion of a city engineering stormwater utility property at 7997 Raymond Road. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Cantrell, seconded by Mr. Rui. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It passes. We can't do public hearings, but we can do secretary's report.
Thank you. Looking forward to our March 5th meeting. A couple of changes. First, the first item on the list, 222 North Charter Street. Since this agenda was put together, we've realized that that project will be delayed to a future meeting, unknown meeting date at this time. Second, the Rimrock Road proposal will be before you. This is a demolition conditional use for a new 144 room hotel on Rimrock. And then the other one to highlight here would be the next 2507 Winnebago Street, again to construct 2 apartment buildings with 60 total dwelling units as part of the Union Corners development. And then looking ahead to March 19th, the one I'll mention on this list is the third one down, the Birchwood Point subdivision for a new 130 new single-family lots and 45 lots for 2-family twin homes, and also some public parkland and stormwater management. So a new plat will be before you on that evening. I think that's it for the Secretary's report this evening.
Thank you. I believe there are no announcements, so we will be informal until 5:45. 5:45. It's time for us to take up public hearings. I want to remind everybody again, please turn off your cell phones. And also, some people have noticed you can sit in the last couple of rows. You don't have to stay on the sides. I think you can see better back there, but it's up to you. I'm going to take up the consent agenda first, and then we'll move on to items that are a little more contentious. Let's see. Items 3 and 4 are being referred to the March 5th meeting. Item 3, Legistar 50130, changing zoning of property at 4802 Sheboygan Avenue from SC to PD GDP. And item 4, Legistar 49928, approving the preliminary plat of Madison Yards at Hill Farms on property at 4802 Sheboygan Avenue. Items 5 and 6 will be on our regular agenda. Item 7 is on consent, Legistar 49916, consideration of a conditional use to construct a second accessory building that will exceed 10% of the lot area at 2802 Willard Avenue. Item 8, Legistar 49921, a demolition permit and conditional use to construct an addition to a single-family residence in excess of 500 square feet on a lakefront property at 4146 Veith Avenue. Item 9 will be referred to the March 5th meeting, Legistar 49922, demolition permit and conditional use to demolish a commercial building and construct a 4-story mixed-use building at 208 Cottage Grove Road. Item 10 is off consent. Item 11, Legistar 40105, conditional use for a home occupation at 6406 Weston Drive. Item 12, Legistar 49688, approving a certified survey map of property owned by the University Research Park at 501 Charmony Drive. And item 13, Legistar 50106, certified survey map of property owned by Cherokee Park, Inc. at 1904 Wheeler Road. I have the following registrations on the consent agenda. On item 7, David Fowler, 2802 Willard Avenue, in support, not wishing to speak. On item 8, Stephanie Mader, 4146 Veith Avenue, in support, not wishing to speak. On item 8, Steve Schulfer, 7780 Elmwood Avenue, the architect, in support, available to answer questions. On item 11, Suzanne M. Overcamp, 6406 Weston Drive, in support, available to answer questions. On item 12, Aaron Olver, 510 Charmony Drive, representing University Research Park, in support, available to answer questions. On item 12, Quinn Perky, I hope I have that correct, 510 Charmony Drive, representing University Research Park, neither supporting nor opposed, available to answer questions. On item 12, Ron Class, 7530 Westwood Way, in support, available to answer questions, representing University Research Park. And finally, on item 12, Paul Munch, 601 Pickford Street, in support, available to answer questions, representing University Research Park. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Mr. Cantrell, seconded by Ms. Berger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes. Those of you who are here on the consent agenda, enjoy your evening. There's a basketball game I can recommend. Alder King.
Can we potentially take the item that was pulled off consent ahead on the agenda?
That is my plan.
Okay.
So Alder King is requesting that we take up item 10, which has one registrant, ahead of items 5 and 6, which have more than one registrant. So we will do that. Item 10, Legistar 50104. So, there's talking going on. Could you please take your conversations outside? A demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence with no proposed use at 929 Williamson Street. I will open the public hearing. Do we need a staff report, or should we just? Okay, we have a registrant wishing to speak. No, you have to come up here, and we're looking for your form.
We know we have it.
We know we have it, we just can't find it.
That's okay. Do I direct my comments to you or to
You direct it to the commission, you introduce yourself.
My name is Caden Howell. I purchased the property at 929 Williamson Street, which was Ray Peterson owned property for 50 years, which has fallen into abandoned, and was about a year before I purchased it, was marked no occupancy by the city because it's in such poor condition. I saw that the recommendations were coming up as recommend demolition. I really appreciate that. We're very eager to get this taken down and make our area of the neighborhood look a little prettier. I just wanted to request to remove the restrictive covenant because I believe that I've shown that I've been conscientious in caring about my neighbors. I went before the Marquette Neighborhood Planning and Preservation, Planning and Development Committee. And then I saw it and got approval from the Landmarks Commission. In any case, I'm really eager to go through with this. If you feel that you can't grant me waiving that additional restriction, I'll be willing to accept it. I just wanted to speak for a moment to make that request.
Are there questions for Ms. Howell? Seeing none, thank you. We have I'm sorry, Mr. Rui, I didn't see.
Because I hadn't studied this one very hard because I assumed it'd be on consent. What restricted covenant are you talking about?
In the document that I got back, I don't suppose I left it at my desk.
What's right there?
Thank you. Yeah. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what would be in the covenant, but I do know that independently of the covenant, I will abide by the existing zoning. It would have to be a single family residential home where it is now.
Oh, I see, okay.
But I believe it's just an additional protection. I think there have been some bad feelings with projects in the past in this neighborhood, and Wilmar is a very passionate neighborhood and just wants to see it protected.
I understand what it is now.
Sorry.
Typically, that type of demolition goes with the approval of a new building. We want to have a say in the new building if there is ever one there. I understand it now.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We have an additional registration. John Harlevison, I think. John Harrington, thank you for the assistance. 928 Jennifer Street, in support, available to answer questions. I will close the public hearing. Are there questions for staff? Ms. Berger?
I was just going to ask staff if they could explain a little bit, I mean, Commissioner Rui mentioned it, but just a little bit of the background behind why we asked folks for that, and if we ever waive that, or what would the conditions be for us to typically waive that?
I think the Plan Commission could consider either option, whether or not to place the deed restriction on the property. In this particular case, the item will need to come before the Landmarks Commission, since it is in a local historic district. That's one consideration the Plan Commission could make. However, in even the recent past, the Plan Commission has differed from the Landmarks Commission with regard to the placement of buildings along Williamson Street. And staff felt that it would be good to provide the Plan Commission with an opportunity to see the proposed building at some point in the future when it's proposed. But again, the Plan Commission may make either decision.
Mr. Hagenow?
I just have to disclose that I know Mr. John Harrington, so from many, many years ago. I did not realize that he was here for this issue, so, but it will not affect my judgment on the
Thank you.
matter.
Anyone else? Then a motion, Mr. Cantrell?
I would move that we approve staff's recommendation on this project. And if I get a second, I'll explain mine.
Mr. Rui seconded.
The Plan Commission typically has a plan which we can approve when we review a demolition. So that's why we're a little, I guess, reluctant to just allow a development to occur, especially in an area that Williamson Street is a fairly sensitive area. It's a historic area, and we think that some additional review may be appropriate. I think that the applicant's done an excellent job in pursuing all the approvals and necessary on this project. But if the property ever changed hands, maybe the future owner would not be as interested in doing the right thing as I guess. So I think that I agree with staff's recommendation and would recommend that.
Okay, any further discussion? Mr. Hagenow?
I just want to add that I agree with Mr. Cantrell's statements there. When I first saw this on the consent agenda, I was thinking about calling or emailing staff to get it pulled off until I read that covenant being placed on there. So I really appreciate staff's work on that, and yeah, I am in agreement with this.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Then all those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Bringing us back to the only other items on our agenda, which are items 5 and 6. Item 5 is Legistar 49895. Changing zoning of properties at 1720 Monroe Street and 625 South Spooner Street from TRC2 and PD to PD GDP SIP, which is Plan Development, General Development Plan, Specific Implementation Plan District. And item 6, Legistar 49690, a demolition permit to demolish a bank located at 1720 Monroe Street. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Plan Commission. This item was before you back on January 22nd of this year, at which time it was recommended to be placed on file. At the February 5th meeting, the Plan Commission voted unanimously to reconsider both of these requests. On February 7th, the applicants resubmitted revised plans, which are before you this evening. Those changes include generally three areas. One is reducing the building by 2 feet 8 inches. That includes 2 feet coming from the ground floor. The second story was lowered 2 feet. As a result, the clear story windows were removed from the commercial facade along Monroe Street and West Lawn Avenue. And the additional 8 inches were gained or reduced by the fifth floor, or the top of the building being lowered 8 inches. I have handed out a revised drawing that is at your places. It looks like the draft that was included with your packets on Friday. Please pay attention to the one that says elevation comparison in the lower left corner. That one has the updated dimensions for the revised plan. Secondly, the mass of the building was reduced mainly in the northeastern corner, where the upper stories were chiseled away in a sense, and the result is for the upper floors, the building was pulled back from the property line from 17 feet 8 inches to 31 feet 9 inches. Again, that's for the upper stories. This has improved the transition to the nearby residents compared to the original submittal. I would then refer you to a second handout, the smaller one. It's 2 sides. It's a graphic showing the various buildings along Monroe Street and what the setback is from the nearby residential area, what the building height is at the kind of initial plane versus the subsequent, if necessary, if it kind of tears back. And I would just point to several of them indicate whether they have alleys that is in between the subject parcel and the neighboring residentially zoned parcel. Third, there have been 8 bicycle stalls that have been moved, or added rather, along the West Lawn Avenue and Monroe Street and Stockton Court facades on private property, but along the sidewalk. The Planning Commission is advised to consider these modifications against the approval standards for demolition permits, zoning map amendments, and plan developments. This information should be carefully weighed against the recommendations in the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan, which are described in the original staff report. Staff note that while revised, the proposed 5-story building remains a story taller than what is generally recommended in the adopted plans. In relationship to adopted plans, the Planning Division advises the Planning Commission to provide clear findings on the specific factors, including any site-specific considerations used to reach this decision. Should the Planning Commission again move to recommend/place these items on file, it must provide findings of fact listing the standards that have not been met and the reasons such standards were not met. Should the Planning Commission find that the revised proposal meets the approval standards, it should forward zoning map amendments to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval. Additionally, the Planning Commission should find the standards are met and approve the requested demolition permit. Thank you.
Thank you. I will open the public hearing, and here's how we're going to proceed. The applicants have asked me to group 3 presentations together for a total of 9 minutes, after which then I will take up the first 3 opponents for 3 minutes each, and from that point on, we'll alternate back and forth. So the applicants speaking together are Ann Morrison, 1933 Keyes Avenue. In support, wishing to speak, representing Urban Land Interests, Brian Reed, 749 University Row. In support, wishing to speak, and Doug Hirsch of Potter Lawson, 749 University Row. In support, wishing to speak. So we'll give you 9 minutes. We'll give you an additional minute if you need it. And the clock will start as soon as Ms. Morrison starts speaking.
All right. It's great to be back here tonight with our revised proposal. When we were here before Plan Commission in January, what we heard from you was that there were a lot of things about the project you liked. Some of you said you were 85% or 80 or 100% there, but that there were a few areas where you had some real concerns and where you wanted to see changes made. We've responded to all the concerns that we've heard expressed and are doing the things that Chris outlined in his staff report. So we increased the setback along Stockton Court, which was an area of concern. We reduced the building height for the entire building by 2 feet 8 inches. We reduced the extent of the 5th floor, and we relocated bike parking for the retailers. These are significant and meaningful changes and are in addition to the many other changes we've made over the course of the last 10 months. We've been working on this project for months, and our goals remain the same. Our goals are to create a beautiful building that adds needed housing, particularly for retirees and for young families who want to join our neighborhood. Our goal is also to restore retailing to this block where it's been, historically been a retail block. Whoops, excuse me. We want to respect the input that we've received thus far and to honor the commitments that we've made. So the new changes that we're making are in keeping with the overall design direction that was so well received. We've communicated the changes with neighbors in meetings, large and small, and as outlined in the staff report. The building remains consistent with the neighborhood plan. The Monroe Street Commercial District Plan, which is now 10 years plus old, does not prohibit buildings of more than 4 stories. It goes out of its way to discuss situations in which flexibility is warranted. This is a unique and largely vacant site. It should be used responsibly. It's in between the Clarendon apartment complex and in between Monroe Commons. It does not set precedent for other mid-block sites on Monroe Streets. In fact, the building that's being proposed is now significantly shorter than Monroe Commons and is significantly shorter than the Szymanski 1600 block proposal that was approved by the commission. Our community is making a significant investment in Monroe Street with the reconstruction, and this is a really ideal time to leverage that investment for the benefit of all with an appropriate project that reflects our community's values and adds strength to our neighborhood. I know we have a lot of registrants, and I'm glad that there's so many folks out tonight, and so I'm going to keep it going. I think I didn't even use my 3 minutes, Brian.
Okay. Brian Reed with Power Lawson. So the site, the irregularly shape of the site there at the corner provides some challenges that lead to some of the rationale as to why we were pursuing PD versus the TSS zoning, and some of the diagrams further on will get into that more. Primarily looking at trying to provide access at the existing points off of Spooner and Stockton and avoid introducing any kind of mid-block access points for vehicular access, that is, on Monroe Street. One of the first, I guess, revisions that we have made after we received comments from the city and from the Plan Commission, the red areas highlight where we have relocated the retail bike stalls. They're spread pretty much equally around the perimeter on Monroe Street and wrapping down to West Lawn, so that there's fairly adequate access to any of the retailers' entries off of Monroe. So previously we had them on Spooner, and it's just a much better location for them to be close to the entries. This diagram shows that sort of 45-degree step back that the TSS provides guidance for off of rear or side yard setbacks. The image on the left shows the previous building massing. The image on the right shows our proposed changes. This also indicates one of the primary reasons why the PD has been pursued is that to kind of remove the covered parking entry, which is kind of being cut through right now by that 20-degree or that 20-foot setback. would create kind of a unsafe condition, we feel, on the north side of the site, as there would have to be a ramp then down to the parking, so kind of poking out into the, what would be the required setback for TSS to provide a more safe condition for residents and for neighbors, to keep that ramp down to the parking completely enclosed. This shows where the setback and the 45-degree angle condition would be on the Spooner side. This is also another reason for pursuing the PD, is that with the PD, with the TSS, the 20-foot setback would be occurring in the center of the existing residence that we're trying to preserve on the site. So the building facade of the new building and the massing is held back off of Spooner, but again, this condition really wouldn't be possible if we pursued the TSS zoning. So these are some of the areas that are in red is the area that we've kind of cut back and pulled away from the property line, like Chris had indicated. The previous setback to the building face was 17 feet 8 inches to the upper floors, to that lower one-story element. It's varies roughly 6 to 6.5 feet on that first floor. The upper floors now are at just under 32 feet in setback. The rest of the site, the intent is that the building has been pulled away from all the adjacent property lines to give it kind of as much space as we can to the adjacent properties. As was indicated kind of in the last meeting, there's not an alleyway on the backside of this site, but there's adequate space with the single loaded parking back there that with the existing residents and the building held to the street, that it's creates enough of a setback where it's similar in condition, or in many cases greater in width than what would be allowed with an alleyway. Again, the areas in red kind of show where we've scaled back the building. This is the 5th floor plan, where not only did we pull back the building roughly 4 feet right adjacent to Monroe Street, roughly 23 feet on the northeastern corner there, to again kind of continue that eroded corner to pull the building back out of that 45-degree plane. We also have increased the setback at the 5th floor from 3'4" to 9 feet on the south side, where the building again is kind of coming closer to the Spooner neighborhood and trying to reduce the scale and make it feel a little bit more like a 4-story building kind of at those ends, where the 5-story element is more in the center of the block. These are some of the elevations that you have in your packet. It's hard to see, but the yellow areas just kind of indicate where we're taking the 2 feet out of that first floor of the retail. Most of it was either metal panel or clear story glass that was occurring up above the awnings. The actual scale at the street is still very pleasant for pedestrian activity. The updated plans. Thinking, I think.
Is that their 9 minutes? Can you summarize in an
Okay.
additional minute?
Sure.
Those images.
So the images here also just indicate the line at the top show where the extent of the building used to be, and this shows the updated image as well. We also had removed the balcony on the, or not the balcony, but had put the balcony back to create more of a rhythm, which was another comment that was brought up in the last meeting. Previously, there was a bay window.
Let's keep going to.
It's
Is it freezing on us? Okay.
There we go.
I just want to make sure you get through these, because taken in their entirety, the change in the height and the change in the setback have a huge impact on the scale of the building as perceived from the street level. And so you can kind of see what a dramatic change that has been on all sides.
So yeah, this is facing the Stockton intersection. You can see kind of the drastic change there to that facade to pull it back and create more space from the adjacent property.
And I just want to add to that, as Brian said, the alley behind Szymanski's project and Empire Photography is actually 12 feet wide. The distance that we have between our property on Spooner Street and the adjacent home is 40 to 44 feet wide. So this is much more generous than a typical alley. Thank you.
The questions for the applicant. Mr. Rui first.
Thank you. The first question I've got is loading, unloading, deliveries. I'd like to see more detail on that.
Okay.
So what we have right now is the loading areas that are shown on the surface parking lot. One of the conditions that Sarah Eskridge, Alder Eskridge, had put in her original amendment was that we would have a loading and unloading plan associated, I believe, with new tenants as they move in. The tenants that we have looked at so far, none of them have a lot of loading and unloading at all. They unload and unload in small vans. But it's, right now, that's the site plan.
Maybe I should have said delivery, not loading and unloading. Delivery,
I meant the same thing, honestly.
like commercial delivery.
Yes.
Especially if you're going to have a restaurant and they usually take semis. Restaurants usually have semi-trucks pulling up. How are you going to handle those?
So right now, we are not in any discussions with any large restaurants that would require a semi. None of the tenants that we have talked with would have them. If we had one that could not be accommodated in the surface parking loading area that we've created, we would work with the city, similar to other restaurants in the area, to load and unload along Monroe Street. We understand that no loading and unloading shall be done from Spooner Street.
The reason I ask that is I see a lot of, it's hard to control some of these delivery folks, and I see a lot of semis, long beer trucks that are always parked where they shouldn't be, and I'm wondering, how are you going to handle that? If I'm sure you're going to have at least one restaurant here.
A lot of it is hands-on management, as you can imagine. We certainly don't have the semi-traffic that nearby Trader Joe's has, and a lot of it is working with, we manage a lot of spaces with retail tenants, including restaurants, and most of that is a management issue. Even if you create the space, you've got to make sure that they use it.
Another question I had is a ground floor setback. One point you had about 2.5 foot setback from your neighboring property. I don't know how to explain it. It's up where you've got the indented bike rack up on that drawing.
Yes.
Way in back where bikes won't park. You had that the corner of that building within, I think, 2 foot 4 inches of your neighboring property, not the one you own, but your neighboring property. Have you increased that to the 6 foot setback that is?
I believe to the corner of the building, it's always been 6 feet or more.
No, the drawings you gave us last time, it was 2 foot 4 to that one corner. I'd like to point up to it.
Well, maybe the direct dimension that was listed
What's,
you're talking about, I don't know if I.
you run your
This
cursor
corner here.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't changed any of the geometry of the back of
Well,
the building.
I'm looking at your old plans, and you have 2 foot 4, 2 foot 6 to your neighboring property that you don't own for that setback right there.
We can ensure that we have 6 feet. I
Yeah.
think that was the intent, and it could be a mistake on something, but I think that was our intent.
You showed an indent here. I don't know if that was an indent for covered parking or if it was meant that you put the building back that far.
The building kind of has always jogged like that to allow access back to that triangular space back between the properties. So, I mean, we won't want to go any less than 6 feet. That would kind of be a minimum to make sure that there'd be adequate access.
If you look at your drawings from the last meeting, you had, I think, I forgot, 2 foot 4, 2 foot 6 at that corner.
Then the dimension I guess was probably incorrect, because we haven't had anything less than 6 feet.
The other question, you mentioned balconies. How deep are the balconies?
The typical balconies are 5 feet.
What's this, does that conform with the city code for balconies?
In terms of, they don't project out
For
past.
the depth, for the depth, balcony size.
I mean, they provide adequate clearance and size for accessibility onto the decks, and the decks don't project out. The decks typically project out 2 feet from the face of the building, which is still above our actual property. They
Actually,
don't extend.
projecting out wouldn't bother me. I'm concerned about how deep they are.
Okay,
That, maybe you should address that to staff.
I'll ask staff about that later.
okay.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Berger?
So as part of the change is, obviously, since you did shrink up some of those, the upper floors and that corner, the unit mix changed, and I just wanted to hear a little bit about that, because it was, I know when you discussed it, marketing it to retirees, young families, and oftentimes those demographics prefer to have more than one bedroom, but it looks like the unit mix went from 46% 2 and 3 bedrooms to 35% 2 and 3 bedrooms. Could you just talk a little about that, and if you had explored other ways to remix the units when you shrunk the building?
Yes, we explored a number of ways to get at the right unit mix and to arrive at one we think kind of hits the market. I will say that we do have a wait list of folks interested in moving into this building. 2 of them are women in their 60s who are sisters. One is moving from down the block and one is moving from another city, and both of them are interested in 1-bedroom apartments. So I do think it's a myth that folks who are downsizing will only be interested in 2s and 3s, but it's something we certainly looked closely at. We wanted to make sure we preserve those 3s because that's really what's missing in the neighborhood and in the market, and preserve some larger 2s as well. So we did lose units and we did have to make it up. A lot of those changes were actually on the 5th floor, where you just don't have the width to get those bigger units in when you downsize that 5th floor. But we still think we'll meet our market demographic, and we believe that partially because we're familiar with the neighborhood, but partially because we're getting letters of interest still. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Hagenow.
So part of the green roof over the parking entrance area has been expanded, if I'm looking at this correctly, right? Or
yes.
is there, I don't remember, was there access to that green roof for residents of the building or no?
No, it's not
No?
intended for
Okay.
resident access. It's just intended as a green roof. The common space is really that top floor.
Okay. And I think you had mentioned in the last meeting that you were going for like some LEED certification.
I don't think we will intend to pursue LEED certification. The things that we're doing in terms of green design are a car share, the green roof, electric car charging stations, and we use energy efficient systems throughout our buildings. So we will be looking at those energy efficient systems, both with an eye towards making sure we have the quietest equipment possible, but also towards maximizing kind of our focus on energy incentives. We work closely with Focus on Energy on all our projects.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Cantrell.
The green roof, is one of the purposes of the green roof, is it for stormwater?
It wasn't originally intended, honestly, for stormwater, but that's certainly a nice benefit of it. It was really at the suggestion of the nearest neighbors that said that they would feel more comfortable with that if it was green. And we also looked at kind of the PD requirements, historic preservation, high quality architecture, green design, and we thought that that would go away towards demonstrating, a lot of stuff you do internally people don't see and they don't feel like a green building, but you put a green roof on it and they're like, ah. So, I think it'll be a better buffer with the neighborhood and a more attractive neighboring use.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Then thank you.
Thank you.
Now, as I said, I will call 3 opponents in a row, and I want to point out we have a lot of people wanting to speak this evening, so I'm going to call out 2 names at a time so that the next person will always be ready to move right up. So our first opponent is Wendy Fernside, 912 Van Buren Street, opposed, wishing to speak, to be followed by Lauren Zieglin. So, Ms. Fernside, come on up, and Lauren Zieglin, be ready next. Oh, here you are. Thank you. You've got 3 minutes. If you need an additional one, we'll provide it for you.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Wendy Fernside. I've lived at 912 Van Buren Street, 3 blocks from the property at question, since 1978. I am a past president of the Dudgeon Monroe Neighborhood Association. I love this neighborhood and am committed to both its near and long-term future. I oppose the project as proposed for 3 reasons. First, it is too tall, too big, and out of scale with most of the commercial district on Monroe Street and with the surrounding neighborhood. Second, it is inconsistent with both the Madison Comprehensive Plan and with the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan. And third, it does not meet the requirements for approval as a planned development. When you heard this request on January 22nd, you asked the developer to come back with a revised proposal that addresses these 3 issues. I, too, would have been very happy to have the developers return with a similar project with a design, height, and step backs that are consistent with the plan and the neighborhood. But they did not do that. At 5 stories and 1 full block long, the proposed building is still just too big. It is still 5 stories high. It is still 65 units. It looks like a huge rectangular block. It is better than it was, but not better enough. You only need to look at the elevation drawings in the developer's packets, especially the Monroe Street facade, and to ask yourself whether these buildings look essentially the same as before. I think you'll agree with me that they do. Second, because of its size, the proposed building is inconsistent with the design guidelines in the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan, including building heights are regulated to create streets in character with the surrounding development. Monroe Street's visual character derives from the great predominance of 2-story commercial and 2-story residential buildings. Only a few 3-story buildings front the street. Generally, no building on Monroe Street should exceed 4 stories for the entire length of the street. That's quoting from the Monroe Street plan. The block-by-block guidelines contained in the plan also emphasize these points when they repeatedly call for building heights of, quote, 2 to 4 stories with the 3rd and 4th levels set back from the front facade line. That would be the Monroe Street elevation, not the side elevations that you were talking about just recently. Is this standard absolute? No, of course not. Some deviation is allowed, but the standards are expected to be taken seriously, with exceptions made rarely and for strong reasons. This kind of exception was made for Monroe Commons, where, and I'm quoting from the Monroe Street Commercial Plan District here, the inclusion of a grocery store was the basis.
Would you summarize in a minute, please?
Oh my goodness, that's going to be very hard. I have more to say. That building was given an exception, Monroe Commons. This building is not so different. This building has exactly the same uses that are allowed in the TSS district, that is the district that the rest of the Monroe Street Commercial District is zoned. It doesn't meet the standard for a planned development approval because you could build the same kind of multi-story mixed-use development in the zone that's predominant in the area. The only difference is this one is bigger. It's much bigger than would be allowed in the TSS zone, and that's why it's not appropriate for this neighborhood. They could bring it down. If they took off the 5th floor, they would reduce the number of apartment units from 65 to 53. That's still a big apartment building. 4 stories is what's recommended in the plan. I think it's a mistake to decide that the character of this street should change.
I'm afraid your time's up. You need to
Okay.
just, another sentence or two and wrap it up, please.
There's a process, if you feel that Monroe Street should redevelop with large, massive buildings like this, there's a process for doing that. It's a planning process. You would need a new public input process, a new plan for the area, and then zoning to match it. Right now, it doesn't match any of those things, and that's the reason it should be denied.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions for you. Well,
Okay.
there's still at least one. Alder Zellers.
I just wondered if you had any significant points that you didn't get to that you wanted to share with us?
Well, I have several, and the key one is about the fact that that this building will make a wall along Monroe Street, of large buildings on that lower part of the commercial district that is not consistent with the rest of the street. That there is another big building in that area. It was given an exception. It is Monroe Commons, and it was given an exception because the neighborhood lost a grocery store. We wanted a grocery store. For 5 years, we were clamoring to get a grocery store, and when that development came along and included a grocery store, they were given approval for a 5th story as a special exception. It was not expected to set the standard for the street. And the plan that I referenced was developed after, was approved. It was developed during the process when Monroe Commons was built, but it was approved after Monroe Commons was built and occupied. And it still contained all of those requirements for 2 to 4 stories with step backs on the 3rd and 4th story. So that's what the neighbors wanted. If you think differently, like I say, there's a process for it, and it isn't to simply decide here, there, and the other place that you should just make an exception without it being something that is really exceptional.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Anyone else? And thank you, Ms. Fernside. The next registrant in opposition is Lauren Zieglin, 3228 Conservancy Lane, Middleton. Opposed, wishing to speak, to be followed by Susan Hanley. Welcome, Mr. Zieglin.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Lauren Zieglin. I own 619 South Spooner Street, which would be the property, I guess, 2 doors away from this. So I'm a retired realtor. I was a realtor for 17 years. This is part of my retirement. And in an initial conversation with Ann, she told me repeatedly that her project was going to increase my property value. My tenants don't feel that way, and I don't feel that way based on my experience of being a realtor. So I'm concerned that my tenant's going to leave depending on what happens with this project. They need to move my garage. And when you move my garage, my backyard gets smaller, and I'm smart enough to know that smaller backyards don't sell as good as bigger backyards. My tenants want a solid wall to protect them from the parking lot where we are going to be having deliveries, et cetera, et cetera. They are concerned about noise, and their concerns are my concerns, because if they go away, then I don't have that retirement income that I want. They're concerned about the exhaust smells. They tell me, which is something I never thought about, that the height of that building will block a lot of natural light into their house. And natural light sells houses. Again, the loading area is a big concern. I wasn't aware of it, but one of you brought up the setback of 2.4 feet versus 6 feet. That's getting really, really close to my property. So those are my concerns, but when I walked in tonight, Ann very logically said, you know, are you for my project or not? And I said, well, right now, no, I'm not. And I said, you know, I really have a concern that this is going to affect my property value, which again is my retirement. And she told me in the hallway, we want to buy your house. That's the first I ever heard of that. So all my concerns go away if ULI buys my house, because then, you know, it's not my house. They can do whatever they want with it. So I'm just, you know, I'm just being honest.
Well, we're going to have a long hearing. Maybe it'll be consummated by the time we're finished.
It could be, I mean, so.
Are you finished?
I think I'm done.
Okay, questions?
And my
Mr. Siegel?
wife will not believe that I actually said that much in 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. The next registrant is Susan Hanley, 1806. I'm sorry?
There's a question.
Oh, there's a question. I'm sorry. Ms. Berger.
Sorry about that. I did just want to, just in case they don't buy it from you tonight, I did want to check. You had mentioned wanting a solid fence, and I was kind of scrambling to look through here and see if it mentions it. Have they talked about putting in a solid fence along the property line? Yes.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so that hasn't been discussed?
Not with me, at least.
Okay, I'll see if I can get
They
clarification
may have
by the
discussed that
end
with
of
my
the-
tenants.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. The next registrant is Susan Hanley, 1806 Kais Avenue, opposed, wishing to speak. She'll be followed by Peter Daly. Mr. Daly, come on up. You'll be next.
I am Susan Hanley. I live on Kais Avenue. I've lived there for many years. I went away and came back, and I wish to express my opposition to a 5-story apartment building on the corner of Monroe and Spooner. I've taken a petition around the neighborhood, and most of the people I was able to contact have expressed opposition to a 5-story apartment building and wish to see the Monroe Street commercial plan adhered to. And now that I've heard Ann's offer for the house on Spooner Street, I'm horrified, because they will need more parking. You can't get by with that size of building with only 14 spaces behind it. It just, in any case, I would like to urge that before the zoning is changed on Spooner Street, or approval is given of the design of the 5-story building, that a neighborhood impact study be done. Agreeing to zoning changes or approving a new 5-story construction without further study sets a very bad precedent. Thank you. I don't see, if this project is approved, what will protect the rest of Monroe Street. The 1700 block has some very good places for development, I suppose. Some very old places that could be made into large apartment buildings. So, thank you.
Questions for Ms. Hanley? Thank you. The next speaker is Peter Daly, 1112 Lincoln Street, in support, wishing to speak, to be followed by Dan Scanlon.
Good evening. I'm Pete Daly. I've lived in the neighborhood the last 25 years, and I'm in support of this project. I think it will add to the vitality of our neighborhood. I live just 7-8 blocks away. I also work as a school crossing guard right at this corner, so I probably have spent more time on this corner than anybody in this room. I've worked there for the last 14 years and seen the corner develop into a vibrant urban corner and a hub in the neighborhood. And I enjoy working there, and I expect that this project will add to that vitality and life that I see every day. So I'm open to any questions or
Thank you,
comments.
Mr. Daly. Thank you for your brevity. Any questions?
All right.
That's a hit.
All right.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next registrant is Dan Scanlon, 605 South Spooner Street, opposed, wishing to speak.
My neighbor has to leave, and I would like to yield my time to him or trade places if I could.
Sure.
His position is the same as mine.
Okay, well,
This is Tim Thompson.
okay. Come on up, Mr. Thompson, I'll figure it out. Okay, I got it. It's not rocket science.
All right, well, very well, thanks for that. My name's Tim Thompson. I own the property at 622 Stockton Court, which is about 40 feet from the wall of the parking structure at the corner of Roberts and Stockton. I've gone and had a lot of conversations regarding some of the things that I think the infrastructure is going to have a difficult time supporting, particularly as it relates to parking, deliveries, and traffic. Those have kind of been, I think, beaten pretty hard, and I think everyone here understands the challenges associated with that. However, as we've kind of moved forward here, we've begun to hear that this project must be 5 stories tall in order to cash flow and make sense as a project. And I believe that's probably true the way that things stand today. I think that at the end of the day, this project boils down to sort of 2 things: the construction budget and the property acquisition cost. The property acquisition cost is not something that was determined by a market valuation. This property was not on the market. These are 2 people that have done, not people, but 2 groups that have done business before that have a real estate transaction in place. And the price associated with that real estate transaction is based upon having a 5-story building in place. What the Planning Commission has the opportunity to do is to say, what is the appropriate size and scale of a building at this property? And that size and scale, as you've determined to be appropriate, given all the infrastructure and the neighborhood concerns and all these other things, will then inform a property acquisition price that is based upon what you folks feel is an appropriate use of this property. Then we can hear a proposal for something that might not have to be 5 stories tall in order to cash flow. And so I think that while this project, as things stand with the numbers associated with it, must be 5 stories tall, and I'm being kind of paraphrasing what I'm told by ULI, this does not, that doesn't mean that you folks are obligated to decide that it must be 5 stories tall. And I wanted to leave it with that. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Thompson? Seeing none, thank you, sir. So I kind of got a little screwed up here. The next registrant is Jeremy Wallace. I think it's 1720 Keyes Avenue in support, wishing to speak, followed by Muriel Crone.
1820 Keyes, sorry, bad penmanship.
I can fix it. Thank you.
I apologize for using my phone. My printer jammed on the way out. So my name is Jeremy Wallace. I live 1 block from the proposed site. My wife and I have been homeowners for 16 years. My family feels very fortunate to live in the neighborhood. We've seen how a sustainable development project like the Monroe Street Commons has been beneficial to the neighborhood. While there are a few things that I would have changed with that project, I think the good certainly outweighed the bad. I feel even more confident with this project, knowing that the project is locally based and that the design team understands the neighborhood. The project also seems to have almost universal support by the neighbors I've spoken to. You will always have a few naysayers, but I think that the overwhelming majority of my neighbors realize that they would much rather have a mixed-use project designed by people in the area instead of those not connected to the community being purely driven by profit. The building is appropriate for the specific site, and you have the opportunity to approve a unique development. The project wouldn't take down any homes. It's at the end of the neighborhood between a taller 5 to 6 story building and a 4-story building. I know that there's been quite a bit of a discussion about the height of the building, but it does not set any new precedents in terms of height. It's lower than other projects that have been approved, and it fits with our neighborhood plan. A final point that I would like to make is the need for housing. The project is in a very desirable neighborhood where houses are often picked up or they're sold in less than a month, or actually before they're in the market. Coincidentally, my neighbor next door just told me that they sold their house within a month. As an example of that, just today, we need housing for retirees who hope to downsize and sell their homes, and for young families who hope to put down roots. This is a place where people want to live, and we should welcome them because they add to the strength of the neighborhood. The current project already has a wait list for the building, and my understanding is that it's primarily older community members from the neighborhood. I urge you to vote in favor of this project. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Wallace? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Muriel Crone, 615 South Spooner Street, to be followed by Amanda Veith with no address. So Ms. Veith, when you come up, I'd appreciate getting your address as well. So come on up and be ready to go next. Welcome.
Hi there. How did this project get so far in the vetting process? I attended the UDC meeting, and we overheard one committee member state at the end of the meeting, "Why do we have zoning laws when we don't enforce them?" Our neighborhood association neither supports nor opposes the ULI plans as proposed, but noted the project is simply too big for the character of the surrounding neighborhood and the future of Monroe Street. ULI's building will take up half of our block and could add almost 200 people with this building. It will dwarf our 100-plus-year-old houses. We will lose our privacy. It will cut off our sunlight. Loud garbage collection, moving vans, the loading dock, arrivals, departures will add further noise and add exhaust pollution only a few feet from our lot lines. Our neighborhood has had to endure flooding basements since Monroe Commons was built. Our 2 small storm sewers on Spooner simply can't handle all that water. The Spooner Keyes manhole covers blow off and stormwater pours into our yards, garages, and basements. Everything in our basements have to be elevated off the floor. The small basin retention area planned for the 625 Spooner backyard will not be adequate for surface runoff and will add more water to our basements. This home will also increase the traffic problems at the busiest intersection on Monroe, Grant, Spooner, and West Lawn. Spooner to Grant is a well-known shortcut to Park Street. Traffic is typically backed up to Regent Street. Why would we want to add to that traffic chaos by building a 5-story, 91-bedroom project at this intersection? The charm of Monroe Street is disappearing apartment building after apartment building. I would like to compare the density and height of the 1720 building by using Hotel Red as a visual. Hotel Red is zoned TSS, and the lot size is less than 20,000 square feet and is 4 stories for now. Associated Bank is zoned PD, and the lot size is over 38,000 square feet, including the 625 Spooner home. The 1720 Monroe parcel is almost twice the size of Hotel Red. Imagine copying 2 Hotel Reds and pasting them into this 1720 parcel, as well as adding a 5th floor and an open air terrace. This project as it is should not go forward. We have no street or alley as a buffer. The property is too close to the neighbors. It stretches from lot line to lot line. This type of growth should not be encouraged nor permitted. It is simply too large for our family neighborhood. It will have a major negative impact on our adjoining properties. The height and size will set a precedent for future projects. I am hopeful this committee will consider my position. Thank you for your attention.
Questions for Ms. Crum? Seeing none, thank you. Amanda Veith.
My address?
Hi. And you're
2241 Hollister Avenue.
okay, just a minute.
Sure.
Okay, following Ms. Veith will be Dan Scanlon. Thank you, Ms. Veith. Go ahead.
I'm here in support of the project. I've been to multiple meetings, both small and large. The developer has been extremely responsible and diligent in, I think, hosting as many community meetings as people have requested or they felt was necessary to really educate, not just educate people on the planning and but include them in the process and really receive their feedback and incorporate that into the plan. I moved here into the neighborhood on Leonard and West Lawn in 1981. My parents are still in the same house. I was gone for many years, but now I'm back raising my family in this neighborhood. I feel like, having learned so much about this project, I feel like it's a very responsible multi-use building, and it really meets a need for increased housing, both for retirees and new residents. And to kind of second Mr. Wallace's comment, it's impossible almost to get even a rental in this neighborhood anymore. And I feel we should be inclusive, that a lot of people might want to be in this neighborhood. So that's kind of it. So.
Questions for Ms. Veith? Seeing none, thank you. Dan Scanlon, here you are, sir.
Good evening.
605 South Spooner Street, to be followed by Paul Munch.
Once again, I absolutely support the redevelopment of this site, and this proposal is getting better, but it still places an unreasonable amount of burden on the immediate neighbors. The claim that this project is not feasible without getting all that it asks may be true, but it is not the role of the neighbors to guarantee the profitability and success of projects for developers. This community is 100 years old and has the circulation of a 100-year-old neighborhood. And from my submitted comments, which you should have in your packets, it is clear that this project is too close and too tall to the contiguous residences. Also, the aggregation of the residential property on Spooner into this larger parcel is not consistent with the Madison's comprehensive plan. I urge the Plan Commission to limit this proposal to a maximum of 4 stories because it is contiguous to residential properties on the north, and at that proposed height of nearly 65 feet tall at the east end, places these residences in significant shadow throughout the year. The difference between the Szymanski building, where the bank is being relocated, is that it is to the north of the residential properties, therefore not casting any shadows on those residences. I understand that the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan is 10 years old, but the vision for the Monroe Corridor has not changed. It is a traditional shopping street and has been developed as that for 100 years. Property values and the desirability of the neighborhood are high, and 5 recent constructed developments have been constructed at 4 stories. Adhering to the adopted district plan guides proposed developments and tempers political and overdevelopment pressures. It is clear in the corridor plan that even in 2007 that they saw the pressures of development and specifically stated exceptions in the plan for the Monroe Commons building. I urge this commission to limit the project to a maximum of 4 stories because of its proximity to residential structures. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Scanlon? Thank you, sir. Paul Munch, 601 Pickford Street, in support, wishing to speak, followed by Richard Scott. Welcome.
Well, thank you. My name is Paul Minch. My wife and I and our kids live on Pickford Street. We've been there for 21 years. Many years ago, I studied architecture with the University of Wisconsin, and my day job is Director of Real Estate at the University Research Park. But I'm here to speak about this particular project. I was surprised when the Plan Commission filed this project because I think it's exactly what the city should want for such a site. The Associated Bank is definitely leaving, and when they're gone, that will be a vacant site, and it's what is currently there is not knitting together our commercial area. It will be developed someday, and it's such a great opportunity to do it now with a developer that the city knows. The principals live near the property. They have on-site and local property management. It'll be maintained as a local firm. It's a great opportunity. There's concern about the building heights, and there's always concern about building heights. There's concern about a 5th floor. I don't have any concerns about the 5th floor. I don't have a concern about it architecturally. I think that there's other buildings in the neighborhood as the neighborhood begins to evolve that are of that scale. I think that architecturally it's been handled very discreetly. My personal view, and I was trained in architecture school, is that buildings should be at the top and go all the way down. So I wouldn't have stepped it back. But I think it's terrific. You actually get something when you get another level of housing on a building. You get the households to support the neighborhood businesses. You get the taxes for our schools. Our kids went through public school. It might be a problem if you couldn't park it, but the project uses the resources of the 5th floor in order to have the gold standard of parking, so that you have 65 units and you have 70 underground parking stalls, which are discrete and hidden away. So I don't think it's going to export any parking problems into the neighborhood. We all hope that there's going to be commercial on the ground floor anyways, and we're not going to have a strip mall with parking in the front in the future. So we already know that it's going to have commercial at the sidewalk, which is what we want. I think the architecture looks great. I think doing it during the time of Monroe Street's reconstruction is the time to get it all done. I think it's a great project. I hope the Plan Commission changes its view about the project and supports it.
Thank you. Questions from Mr. Minch? Did I finally get it right?
Minch, yes.
Thank you. There are none, so thank you. Mr. Scott, who is opposed, says he does not wish to speak. So the next speaker in opposition is Daniel I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Nicolalo. I'm sure I'm screwing it up. 1812 West Lawn. Help me with it. Nicolaldi. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the commission. Thank you very much.
I have lived in this neighborhood for a very long time. I lived in the Clarendon apartments for all my graduate school, and then moved to just behind Trader Joe's. So I live literally a couple of blocks away from the proposed development. And one of the things I want to echo one of the previous presenters is that parking around Monroe Street is complicated. Having another large building such as this one with a commercial front will only make things worse. And yes, you're right, it can have parking lot underneath. But the problem is that when I have visitors coming to visit my house, it's close to impossible to find parking in the street. And guess what? If you have more commercial use, you'll have more people parking in our streets. So if you don't propose more available parking for public use, it's going to be difficult. Somebody else mentioned traffic. Yeah, the traffic around that particular corner, I've been hit twice, rear-ended, just in that precise corner. So if you bring more people into the neighborhood, more the size of the building, it will increase traffic, it will increase the chances of getting rear bumps. Additionally, the developers mentioned that they're not going to have space for semis, or they're not planning to have semis delivery goods to the commercial retail. Well, it's potentially going to happen. I live right behind the loading dock of Trader Joe's. We wake up every morning around 5:30 good days, 5 o'clock bad days, and it's terrible. I'm telling you, getting awake by a semi parking, just waiting for Trader Joe's to open, it's a little complicated. And finally, the thing that was echoed by a lot of people is the height of this building. Natural light is important. I will not want to see a neighborhood where we are in the shadow for the majority of the year. It's bad for having such massive structure. It will be bad for the light of the neighborhood, of the neighbors, for the sidewalk, and also for the rest of the nearing buildings. So again, I'm neither opposed, neither pro this building, but I think it should be reconsidered and should be kept a four-story high, because that will ease the number of potential residents and parking, and also provide more light to the neighbors. Thank you very much.
Questions? Thank you, sir. Carol Orange Schrader, 1909 West Lawn, in support, wishing to speak, to be followed by Julia Kerr. That's okay, I'm sorry, I didn't warn you.
Thank you. I'm a resident of West Lawn, very close to Monroe Commons and not very far from this project. And my husband Dean and I have had a business at 1721 Monroe Street for very close to 43 years. When we went into business as Orange Tree Imports, there was commercial retail spaces across the street. The bank hadn't been envisioned yet, and I will certainly say, as a business owner on Monroe Street, more customers, more businesses, brings more people to the area and brings more customers to the businesses and makes their success more assured. I'm very concerned about what will happen if this project does not go through, however. The bank is moving in mid-May, and that means it's going to be a vacancy. And we can't do better than ULI as a developer. We can wait 2 or 3 years to see if somebody else comes along and wants to do something lower, something cheaper. But meanwhile, we're going to have an eyesore, and then we're going to have the street torn up for the construction process that could have happened during the misery that is about to happen on Monroe Street with the city road work. I feel very strongly that this is the time to do it. And yes, I'd rather have the project be shorter. I'd rather have it be a parking ramp, if anybody asked me. but we don't always get our wishes. And I do think that this is going to be the best use of that property and be a project that we can be proud of. And I'm probably one of the few people in this room that helped draft the Monroe Street Commercial District plan. And I will say that when we were working on that plan, we were desperate to get a grocery store on Monroe Street. We were not necessarily envisioning what Madison in 2020 was going to look like. We didn't understand the importance of density. At that time, most of the buildings on the street were 1 or 2 stories, and I liked it fine that way. And then somebody pointed out that for future planning of our cities, we can't have 1 and 2 story buildings. We need density instead of sprawl. We need biking. We need limited car access so that we don't become a strip of a town of or city of strip malls and sprawling out into the suburbs. So density is good. We're seeing that all around the city. Density is bringing people downtown. It's making the city much more vital. And I think Monroe Street has to play its part in that, because we want a thriving commercial district on Monroe Street when the road work is done. And I think this project is the best way to do that. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Schroeder? Thank you. Julia Kerr, 626 Madison Street, in support, wishing to speak, to be followed by Elliot Madison.
Thank you. I'm Julia Carr. I want to thank you first, start out by thanking you for your time and your service to the city. I spent 4 years on this committee, and I appreciate that as volunteers you're called upon to have some long nights and make some difficult decisions, so thank you. Before I was elected to the District 13 alderperson position, I was the Vilas Neighborhood Association president and one of the leaders with my friend Orange of the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan. So I'm here to offer some perspective based on that background. I know many neighbors have expressed some concerns, and I'm sorry to not be in agreement, but I hope you'll consider a few points. The Commercial District Plan recommending no more than 4 stories is not an absolute. There's no absolute height assigned to what 4 stories looks like, and I think that's something that's important for you to consider. But I also want to let you know from a historic perspective, I guess, that we were singularly focused on a couple things. We're focused on getting a grocery store at Monroe Commons, at the Monroe Commons site, formerly Ken Kopp's. But we were also really focused on mid-block development. We actually never really considered or contemplated development on a full block site like the one you have before you at Associated Bank, which is very short-sighted and frankly ridiculous on our part. But, and I think you'll see that in the plan, and which is quoted in your staff report, as saying the site should remain commercial. I would argue that, the plan never really contemplated that site at all. And so I hope you'll consider that when you weigh the staff's, good report and thoughtful report, when you weigh their concerns about it not meeting the objectives of the commercial district plan. Because I think that's a mitigating factor as somebody who was there and lived through many meetings about it. I also want to just reflect a little bit that building height and mass are perceived in part relative to the width of the building in question and the surrounding properties. And in your staff report, it quotes the Monroe Street District Plan as saying generally buildings of 4 or more stories would be out of character with traditional street residential neighborhoods. And then I'll just say, in order to gain support, buildings higher than 3 stories would need creative design and presentation, which I think this project has, and consideration of contextual impact, specifically, as I mentioned, lot size and proximity to other forms, which in this case include the Clarendon Apartments and Monroe Commons. I hope when you consider those factors, you'll give great weight to UDC's unanimous support of the project as you reflect on its context and how it relates to other buildings. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Carr? Thank you. Next registrant is Elliot Madison, 1801 Keyes Avenue. Welcome, Mr. Madison. You got 3 minutes.
Okay.
I'm 12 and in 6th grade, and I fully support this project. At first, I was disappointed that the Associated Bank building, which was recently remodeled, was going to be demolished. But after hearing more about the quality of the new building, my opinion turned around. The 18 months of construction will bring a lot of dust and noise. Meeting new neighbors and visiting new retail establishments will be well worth it. I personally hope that Monroe Street Library will move to this new space, and I am working with the library director for this to be a possibility. I personally hope a new building will be built with high-quality materials and will look new yet blend in with the older architectural styles of the Monroe Street corridor, so I have no fear of living next to a glass block that stands out. The new development will be 5 stories, but the top floor will be set back from the main facade, so the height will be less noticeable and obnoxious. Modern technologies no longer require a penthouse for ventilation and machinery, so we will be free of too much ductwork blowing copious amounts of bad smells into our properties. I will conclude my commentary with the hope that we leave here tonight with happy thoughts of something new in our neighborhood, an urban place seeing even more density and development than before. It's not downtown, but it's close and getting closer. Any questions?
Mr. Madison, thank you so much. I would like you to come back and testify again. The Barb Sanford, 1211 Garfield Street, opposed, not wishing to speak. Amy Grunwald Madison, 1801 Keyes Avenue, in support, wishing to speak. Sounds like a vaguely familiar address. I have to say, while you're coming up, you should be very proud of your son.
Hi, I'm Amy Grunwald Madison, 1801 Keyes Avenue. We're perhaps the closest homeowners to the proposed building site. We live right behind the Shakespeare Players. And so when we heard that the bank was moving, we were actually at the Szymanski building. They were talking about the alley, and Elliot wanted to hear more about that. So we went to that meeting. We heard the Associated Bank is moving. We're like, wow, we got to tune into what's going to happen to our neighbor here. And honestly, at first we were a little disappointed. We have this great site where we can see the sunrise and the stars come out, and right in the middle of the city. But clearly, the bank is moving. And so when we heard that ULI was taking this project on, and we heard more about the project and what they had envisioned, that there would be high quality businesses coming, possibly civic space, as Elliot alluded to, we really got more and more excited about it and realized that we moved here for the walkability. We moved here so that we could go down to 1 car, so that we could walk for the things that we needed. We don't want to be commuting back and forth. All that traffic between Monroe and Regent is everybody going through the neighborhood to get to these other places. It's not the people who live here. We stand outside and watch it. It's kind of interesting sometimes. So I'm in full support of the project as it stands, with the setbacks and the changes that they've made. They've been so responsive to community input, going way back to the very beginning. I want it to be a local developer that develops this site. It's going to be developed. And so I don't want to wait for another, round of this to go through. And also the construction, it's coming. Why not do it all at the same time? Just like rip the Band-Aid off, and then we'll paint our house 2 years from now. So I'm in full support, and I hope that the commission takes all of these comments and the changes that have been made into consideration when making your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from Ms. Madison? Thank you very much. The next registrant is Eileen Thompson, 311 Campbell Street, opposed, not wishing to speak. Shira Goldman, 1910 Keyes Avenue, to be followed by Jay Humphreys. Ms. Goldman? Okay. Okay.
The Grunwald-Madison family is a hard family to follow, but I'll do my best. My name's Shira Goldman. I live at 1910 Keyes Avenue, and I'm in full support of the ULI development project for 1720 Monroe. My husband and I moved to Madison in 2008, and we purchased our Keyes Avenue home in 2013. We plan to grow old here. We are a one-car family, and we chose our location based on its walkability, vibrancy of the neighborhood, and convenience to retail. Like Amy said, it's inevitable that the Associated Bank site will be developed. The architect and developer behind the ULI proposal are residents of the neighborhood, active in the well-being of our schools, and invested in the future of our community. ULI has gone above and beyond to communicate with the neighborhood, gathering feedback, and responding to concerns. It is my understanding the building will have commercial space devoted to a nonprofit organization. It's also my understanding the residential units will be geared towards retirees and seniors who are looking to downsize but stay in the community. Grandparents. What will the current opponents say if out-of-town developers come in and turn the space into a Walgreens or CVS? A real possibility at the time that Trader Joe's was being considered. For those who say there's enough housing on the near west side, my experience that this is an extremely difficult neighborhood to find housing in, with most houses selling behind the scenes before even going to market. We need more housing to ease this pressure and reduce demand. In summary, ULI is a community-minded company who've demonstrated a commitment to high-quality design and sustainability. I hope the neighborhood and planning committee will give them a chance to do what they do best. Thanks.
Questions for Ms. Goldman? Seeing none, thank you. Jay Humphreys, 430 West Main Street, in support, wishing to speak. Welcome, to be followed by Doug Poland.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Jay, and I'm a professional that came to Madison 4 years ago. I came from a place where neighborhoods like Monroe are inaccessible for reasons that I can't control. There's no units, they don't have space to develop, they don't have the lots available to even tear down and redevelop as needed. I came here partially to find a lifestyle for myself and my son that wasn't restricted by these reasons. My son is now 4. I've lived in 3 different neighborhoods in the Madison region, and I've yet to find the right neighborhood to call home. This is why I speak in support today, partially because it pains me to hear individuals here speaking against a building, about a few feet here, about a shadow being cast there. Madison and the Monroe neighborhood, I feel, should be defined by its residents, by its community to a degree, and the openness to welcome others into that community. I ask the council to remember the perspective of the 65 families that would live here. How we would be excited to join a community as unique as Monroe, one that isn't defined by student housing or by epic housing, but by the community and the individuals that live there. How disappointed we would be that neighborhoods not bound by lack of land, with the ability to create spaces for us and our families, still argue about the number of units, while real people, even if faceless, but that are myself and my son Augie, simply hear, "You aren't welcome here." My partner lives less than a block from this proposed development. I've already spent time in this neighborhood. I've seen the kids play at block parties. I've been welcomed into many of the homes here. I know that Monroe is the type of community that wants to welcome welcome families like us. Welcome these other community members. Welcome these other constituents. I can't speak for the others that have spoken here today. I don't know why they dislike this explicitly. Maybe they don't realize that their opposition to parking reads as unwelcoming to other families. Maybe they really are trying to limit access to their neighborhood. They feel it's something so precious they don't want to share. Maybe these are all straw man arguments for things that they don't wish to present clearly. This, however, is why a council such as this exists. I would ask to guide us through the fog that is individuals' opinions, to determine if the opposition here represents the neighborhood, the public opinion, or even the greater good. So I ask the council to consider a few ideas in closing. 1, look beyond the individual speculation tonight. Has any recent development been so contentious 6 months later? Is anyone still complaining about whatever the last items complained about?
Can you summarize in a minute, please?
Yes, thank you. Has anyone's quality of life been significantly reduced and depreciated due to the recent developments? Second, remember the future community members. Remember the unspoken support of 65 families that won't speak here tonight, that we would like to live here, the excitement we have to join a neighborhood like Monroe, and is our value of quality of life and the lift we hope to bring to the entire community a positive increase to that neighborhood? I think yes. It seems impossible that even the concerns expressed by opponents tonight can offset the contribution of 65 new families to participate in this community. I continue to hope that opportunities like this development in neighborhoods like Monroe are available. Augie and I would like to live here. I would like to join this community, and I hope that someday the opponents to this development would welcome us there.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. Thank you very much. Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. The next registrant is Doug Poland, 2013 Adams Street, in support, to be followed by Daniel Goldman.
Thank you and good evening. I'm a Vilas resident. I'm a private practice lawyer. I have my offices in downtown Madison at 10 East Doty Street. It is a ULI building. I've been a ULI tenant for a little over 2 years there. I am past board chair of Monroe Street Arts Center, which is located just down the other end of Monroe Street. I'm currently the Vilas Neighborhood Association representative on the Edgewood Neighborhood Liaison Committee. I'm the vice chair of the Downtown Madison Inc. Board of Directors. I also was a citizen member of the South Capitol Transit Oriented District Committee that met a number of years ago. I'm speaking tonight as an individual, but I do have these experiences that impact the views that I would like to express tonight. I'd like to take a step back. We've heard a lot of testimony tonight about very specific things. I would like to talk about a broader topic, and that is sustainability, that has me very concerned. We're at a time where our federal government is backing away from the Paris Climate Accords, where we're not taking seriously as a nation what's happening with sustainability in our country. We have an opportunity in this city to do something about that and do something about it now. As you may know, between 2010 and 2016, Madison experienced an 8.4% gain in population. We added 20,000 people. Do you know what that's going to jump to, what's projected to jump to by 2040? And this is by the Applied Population Lab at the UW. We're projected to grow by another 30,000 residents. Where are we going to put these people? We can build out or we can build up. We can go one of two ways. We need to build up. We need to engage in the process of smart growth. What is smart growth? I probably don't need to lecture you about that, but it's really defined as growing in a contained, established urban corridor connected to an urban center or downtown through proximity or mass transit. Smart growth is such because it's planned to be self-supportive over a long time through its multifunctional uses and ease of access via walkability and bike trails and public transit. I'm reading from Smart Cities. Madison has already outlined how we're going to do this, and that is in our sustainability plan. I'm assuming that everybody is familiar with this and has read it. The sustainability plan strongly supports developments like the development that's in front of you tonight. In the actions plan, this is back from 2011, what did we say? We said one of our actions is we want to promote land use patterns such as residential densities and infill development to reduce reliance on single occupancy vehicle use and increase use of alternative modes of transportation, walking, biking, and transit. That's what this project is. This is transit-oriented development. This is on a major corridor that has transit. It's a block off the bike path. I ride that bike path just about every day from my home, which is right near Edgewood, to downtown. That is a viable way to get around in the city as we work toward having a 20% transit mode by bikes is something that we're working for. So this is transit-oriented development. It is a really good example of that. What happens if we don't build up? Well, we're going to build out. And what does that mean? That means that we're going to be paving over green space. Again, you can look through the sustainability plan, and that is something that the sustainability plan is opposed to. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to promote infiltration of water, of storm water, and we know as the climate warms up that we're having more of these really significant rain events. We need to preserve our green space to be able to preserve water infiltration. Other areas of the sustainability plan, and I encourage you to read through it and take a look at it. Another one of the actions is foster corridor planning, transit-oriented development, and high-density mixed-use development along corridors. So this is very much in keeping, a project that's in keeping with the sustainability plan. The last point I would like to make is about ULI itself. I have been an office tenant of ULI's for the last 2 years. I find their building, and I've been an office tenant in buildings in Chicago and in Philadelphia and in other buildings in Madison. ULI's building at 10 East Doty Street is incredibly well maintained. It's incredibly well kept. They're a very, very good landlord. They're an outstanding landlord, and I'm sure that they will be a great landlord for this project. It's the right project, it's the right place, and they are the right developer to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poland. Questions for Mr. Poland? Seeing none, thank you. Next registrant is Daniel Goldman, 1910 Keyes Avenue, to be followed by Lisa Baker.
Hello, my name is Daniel Goldman. I live at 1910 Keyes Avenue, and I want to express my support for this project. I also want to thank ULI for being interested in the development as they are, the beautiful and thoughtful design that they've brought forward. I'm really excited for more commercial space. I think that I'm also really excited for having space for a nonprofit organization. And I'm even excited for the possibility of a new restaurant. I think that having more commercial space increases the charm, increases the appeal of Monroe Street. I think that we need more people to support these local businesses. And I think that should be a top priority of living in this neighborhood, is supporting these local businesses, and having more people is going to be necessary for that. You know, there's several businesses that seem to have a hard time drawing people, and I don't want that to happen. I want restaurants to stay there. I want businesses to thrive there, and I want more people to be able to support them. I think we're really, really lucky to have this opportunity to have ULI develop this space, given that they're a local developer and the track record they have, and how much thought and care they're putting into the design. I think that, you know, to have a company like ULI develop this instead of an out-of-town developer who doesn't have the neighborhood community interest in mind is essential to really be able to have someone who really cares about the community, and clearly ULI is invested. You know, just today there was a post on the Nextdoor listserv for the neighborhood, and someone said that they would prefer they'd be fine having a Starbucks there as long as it was a smaller building. I think we're missing the point. I think that the point is that this is a fantastic project. It's going to make our neighborhood better. And I don't want a Starbucks there because I want Barriques and I want Crescendo to thrive. And I don't want CVS there because I want Newhauser to be there for another 100 years. And so this type of project is going to support that. The way they design the retail space to have it be small businesses, not big box stores, is huge. And I think this is the right way to go. And I think our priority should be to support local businesses. And I hope that this is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Lisa Baker, 1825 Keyes Avenue, in support, wishing to speak, to be followed by Georgia Rucker.
Great, thank you. So I do live on Keyes Avenue, about 1 block from Monroe Commons and a block from the new development that I'm in full support of. I think ULI has done an incredible job really listening to neighbors, changing their design, and really working with the concerns. And I know it can't be perfect, and I'm sorry for those neighbors who feel as strongly as they do against it. But what I will say, when I came to Madison, we moved here, my family of 4, 2008, and I came here because in the specific neighborhood because I had family who loved the neighborhood. They've been there for 30 years and are still there in Vilas. And my understanding is it's a very inclusive, welcoming, and open neighborhood, and that's what I want for my children and a place to live. Also, the walkability and the sustainability as a one-car family wanting to bike, walk to work and to shops on Monroe Street. What is concerning me, though, is in this discussion, and so I'm not going to go through all of my points because I would go over 3 minutes, but I'm really keying into what are we defining as family neighborhood? And I've heard that several times. We're protecting our family neighborhood, and that's why we're zoning a certain way. We got to be nimble, folks. I mean, we are in a position now where, like someone else said, we need to be considering sustainability. We can't, there's not enough room for the people who are here, and we have to think about our impact on the earth. And also how we define family too, again, is maybe it's one parent and a child. They're not gonna be able to afford the houses in our neighborhood, but I want those folks in my neighborhood. I also really want the baby boomers to stay. I love the range of ages, and my concern is, you know, when they downsize, where are they gonna live? That is gonna affect my community, and that is really painful. I actually feel choked up about it because I have not come to this place in order to be in a neighborhood where everyone looks about the same, has about the same income, and the same family structure. That is not why I'm here, and I will absolutely leave if that's the neighborhood I end up in. So this is a very important opportunity. I am very concerned that if this is not put through at this point and getting the support from you all, that we will potentially end up with a drive-through Starbucks. No offense to Starbucks, but that's not what the neighborhood is really here for. We need to support our our retail folks. And I also have a business and I work on Monroe Street. I also can't thrive if we don't have more people moving in and having a vibrancy about our neighborhood. We've seen businesses move in and out, not necessarily being able to make it. And I think we do need to have some greater density to support us. Thank you.
Questions from Ms. Baker? Seeing none, thank you. Next registrant is Georgia Rucker, 2129 Fox Avenue, to be followed by Karen Haygood.
Hello, I live 3 blocks from the proposed building site, and I'm here to support it tonight. I've lived in the neighborhood for 10 years, and I work on Monroe Street as well, a block away from the site at 1906 Monroe. I come to this mostly as someone who has an appreciation for design. I'm a graphic designer of many years. And while I understand the fear of new development of any kind, I feel like the plan that this local developer has designed and redesigned is welcoming and in line with its neighboring Monroe Street buildings. It's bracketed on either side by already tall buildings, so I think it fits in, especially because it's on a slope. And one thing I found very interesting about the design is that the pedestrian level stair steps with the slope of the street, unlike the Trader Joe's building, which just becomes kind of a wall that pedestrians can't enter. They can enter on the corner, but then because it's a chain, a big box store, there's this big ramp that's just sort of a wall. Whereas this building, every storefront goes down with the slope, which I think will be very welcoming. I too appreciate the walkability of this, and I think it'll continue the vibrancy of Monroe Street. Things kind of peter out right now at the corner of the Commons, and I pretty much never walk down past that point. I go to the library and that's about it, so I feel for any business that's beyond that point. I think this would be a nice connection between the vibrant area at the upper part of Monroe and down near Randall. I also support the addition of diverse housing stock. And like everyone's already said, I think it's a matter of time before this spot gets developed. I think this local developer who has thought about sustainability and friendly design is a very good fit. Also, my final point is, while I empathize with the neighbors who will be directly next to this building, I do think that as someone who has bought a house in the area, if you're buying a house so close to a main thoroughfare, there's always the chance of increased development. And I think that's just Monroe getting larger. I mean, and Madison in general, it's natural for a growing city. And I think it's just a part of growing. I support this project, and I hope the council will as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rucker. Are there questions? Seeing none. Karen Haygood, 716 Edgewood Avenue, in support. No longer here, I guess. Rochelle Andre, 1642 Monroe Street, in support, wishing to speak, to be followed by Tyler Leeper.
Hi,
Hi.
Hi, good evening. I'm Rochelle Andre. I live at 1642 Monroe in the Clarendon Apartments. I'm a renter. So I'd just like to speak to two issues tonight, one being neighborhood character and the second being affordability. So as I mentioned, I am one of the renters in the neighborhood, and I just want to give a little bit of a plug for the value that renters can add. So I've lived in the Clarendon for 4 years now. I love my neighborhood, and I think that renters can be really involved and give a lot back to their community. So renters can serve their neighborhoods as chairs of the transportation committee and provide information to other residents in the neighborhood. Neighborhood residents can also serve on city commissions and provide all kinds of input and learn about community issues. I'm not here in that capacity tonight, but I serve on the city's Equal Opportunities Commission and hear a lot about housing and employment discrimination in the city. So I have a sense that, renters can provide a lot of value. And then I think it's just really important to consider that the character of the neighborhood sometimes gets wrapped up and is almost code for renters not being welcome in communities. That may be the case always, sometimes, or never, but I definitely feel that way sometimes when we talk about character of a neighborhood. And then finally on affordability, I think we all know, or last time I checked, the vacancy rate in Madison was way below a healthy 5%. That is a critical policy issue. It's an affordability issue. It keeps people out of neighborhoods that have access to public transit, green spaces, fresh, good grocery for their families. And this is the ideal neighborhood where we need to have people in with diverse backgrounds. And, I could never afford to buy a home in this neighborhood as a single 29-year-old. I hope I can stay. Rental housing is really important for people like me and for people all over Madison who want to enjoy the very many benefits of a community like this. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Andre? Thank you.
Thank you
for your perspective.
Yep.
Tyler Leeper, 822 West Shore Drive, in support, wishing to speak, to be followed by Rita Charles.
Well, thank you guys for your time and your careful consideration of 1720. My name's Tyler Leeper, and I have grew up on Terry Place and have rented 4 different places along Monroe Street before having to buy outside of the neighborhood. I still stay extremely active within the Dungeon Monroe neighborhood and own a business just off the street. Monroe Street does continue to grow, mainly due to the high demand and interest in the quality of life that this neighborhood offers. The project 1720 is a good one. There is always adverse effects of change, growth, development. But that being said, I believe this is a good project that will help satisfy the need for quality housing and commercial space. I do believe that Ann and the ULI team have designed this project with a great understanding for the community and its needs. And I'm glad that we'll have a building that's owned by neighbors who care about it during its construction, during the management, and throughout operations of the building. Again, I thank you guys for your time, and I, after hearing everybody speak, have very little else to add besides what has been already added. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Leeper? Thank you, sir. Rita Charles, 1914 Keyes Avenue, in support, wishing to speak, to be followed by Andrew Fisher.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paha Charles, and I am the owner of a home located at 1914 Keyes Avenue, 3 blocks from the currently located Associated Bank. I'm here tonight to support the project of ULI. Unlike most people you have heard from tonight, I have not lived on Keyes Avenue or in Madison for years and years. In fact, just this past summer, my husband and our 2 boys moved to Madison, buying our very first home. What may also distinguish us from most of the residents you have heard from tonight is that we have in fact lived in the 3 largest cities in the United States, spending many years in New York, Los Angeles, and most recently, Chicago. I share this because, indeed, we consider ourselves urbanites and enjoy and are attracted to city living. This said, we also very much appreciate having the opportunity to raise our sons, ages 8 and 10, in an area that has a neighborhood feel and a strong sense of community. As we often say to each other, my husband and I, we feel like we've hit the jackpot on Keyes Avenue. To be clear, though, we moved to Keyes not in spite of Trader Joe's or the other retail areas surrounding us, but because of that area. Let me share with you several of the key reasons we strongly support urban land interests and their proposed plans for the current site. First, having reviewed the plans myself as they are publicly available and having scrutinized the mock drawings, most importantly, the proposed building seems absolutely appropriate for the site. It represents an important opportunity as no existing homes will be removed, and it fits with the existing taller 5- and 6-story building where Trader Joe's is located. Second, the residential space is designed to attract a mix of residents, including retirees, single people, small families. Housing is in huge demand in Madison, as we all know, and in this area, in this neighborhood in particular. My mother, soon to retire from New York and to join us here in Madison, is wondering where she will live. This is exactly the kind of residential space that she would want to be in, near her family and within walking distance to the many amenities that Monroe Street has to offer. Third, it is my understanding, as I think we heard tonight, the developers have been very responsive to concerns and to requests to changes meeting the design, setback, and height requirements. To oppose such a plan simply because it appears too big is short-sighted and not in sync with the growth of Madison and similar cities around the country. It is of my opinion that this is the kind of development firm, one that is local and responsive to concerns, that we want leading such a project. Finally, although I am not a local store owner, I can only imagine how important additional retail and housing will be to existing stores on Madison in the future. It is an attractive and lovely area to shop, but let's be realistic, it is not the downtown of the West Side. This said, if this plan is approved, it certainly could be, and for our family, for one, we would welcome this. It is hard for me to imagine how this project does not fit with a neighborhood that wants to prosper, be vibrant, and supportive of the larger Madison community. I urge you to consider approval of the proposed plans. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? The next registrant is Andrew Fisher, 1714 Adams Street, to be followed by Toby Campbell. Welcome, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of this proposal. And I just want to reaffirm what has been said by everyone already so eloquently. I have lived in this neighborhood for about 3 years. I went to graduate school and I graduated last year. I lived in Madison for almost 10 years, and I'm at the point in my life where I'm starting to think about where I want to live long-term, where I want to perhaps buy a house, have a family. And I see that building, I was incredibly attracted to living in the Monroe Street area because of Trader Joe's, because of the amenities we have in this community, because of places like the chocolate shop, ice cream, or Brasserie V. I want to live here because of these things, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to frequent the businesses that might be coming into the new development at 1720. I think those are major assets, and I think we should be encouraging that development. As far as the height of the building, I've never considered that to be a very legitimate argument against the development. I think, as some of the speakers have mentioned, we have to be thinking about sustainability. We have to be thinking about the affordability of housing. We have to think about the big picture here in Madison. Housing is incredibly high demand in the city, and it's important that we build new housing where it fits in perfectly. I read through the Monroe Street commercial district plan, and I believe this kind of proposal really does fit into that plan. This kind of development fits into along the street where you have Monroe Commons, you have this building, and you have the Clarendon. I think that this is something that we need to be considering. We have to think about this big picture, like I said, of sustainability, affordability, and we have to think about how increasing the density where we can get it in the city will help with that. Like I said, I strongly urge you to support this proposal, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Questions? Seeing none. Toby Campbell, 2115 West Lawn, in support, wishing to speak. The last speaker.
The last speaker. Just in case you didn't hear him. I wanted to say thank you all for the work that you do on the committee. And, you know, the neighborhood that I want to live in is one that, and the city that I want to live in is one that listens to people speak and listens to different perspectives with empathy and patience. And so I appreciate that. I've heard concerns about size and height and mass, about parking and runoff. None of those, from a layman's perspective who just lives in the neighborhood, are stop signs for a lot that will be developed. But the green lights on this project sound really bright to me. I mean, the building is beautiful and it's accommodating. It's responsible, it's locally designed, it's locally managed. It fights sprawl, it doesn't require TIF funding. It facilitates families like mine, a one-car family. We moved to Monroe Street largely so that we could be a one-car family. It's entirely walkable. Now is absolutely the time, as you've heard better said from others. I can't imagine that we could do better than this thoughtful project. And because it's already all been said, I don't feel like I need to say it all again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Any questions?
Elliot,
Mr.
you were great.
Well, it turns out he isn't the last registrant wishing to speak. Chuck Erickson, 131 South
Brittingham,
in support, wishing to speak.
Yes, my name is Chuck Erickson. I'm the county board supervisor for this area, and I live on Brittingham Place now, but before that, a year and a half ago, I lived for 25 years on Jefferson Street. So a lot of you are familiar with me being here to oppose certain things, certain changes, which negatively impacted the neighborhoods, specifically around the stadium. But I have been aware of the concern that a lot of neighbors are expressing, and just today finally was able to meet and tour and look at the site and see the impacts on the nearby areas, which I was, concerned about. But just to follow up on something that Doug Poland mentioned, in the county board, I'm directly dealing with the growth that we're experiencing, and we're, if not the largest growth, have the fastest growth of any county in the state. We're the second fastest growing county in the state. So the issue is, how do we accommodate this growth, and where does this growth occur? Many people in the district over the last 10, 12, 14 years, I think, have voted for me because I specifically wanted to preserve farmland. I specifically wanted to have green space or open space between communities. I didn't want us to turn out like LA or the northern suburbs of Chicago, where you go from one city or entity to another, you don't know where you are. Also, just environmental issues in general. I've been a big proponent of sustainability in county operations since 2006 or 2007. So that's the dilemma that I face, or that I deal with. Enough has been said already, but that's what I'm dealing with. And after reviewing the plans and the diagrams, I think this is a pretty nice building. The Clarendon, if that's the name of it, is pretty boring. Kind of looks like a Stalinist block. I can't stand Monroe Commons. I think that's an ugly building, but I like having a grocery store there. And also, that was the agreement that we, the neighbors, made, was to have a grocery store. We would agree to more height. Now, again, it's a gross building in my opinion. But anyway, I think that after seeing the drawings for this site, it does look pretty nice. There have been a lot of accommodations, I think, that have made. I understand people's concerns. I'm told by my family members I'm kind of a stick in the mud. I've been told that by business people who wanted to do things that I thought were detrimental to our neighborhoods, which I opposed. So I understand that sometimes, change isn't the greatest thing, but we're facing growth, and we need to deal with it. So with that, I'll finish up. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. With all deference to those who've already spoken, I want to salute those whose registrations I'm about to read. These are people who are registering but not wishing to speak. Tom Newyar, 1101 Lincoln Street, in support, available to answer questions. Marnie Harrigan, 509 South Spooner Street, opposed, not wishing to speak. David Hoffert, 2006 Monroe, representing the Dudgeon Monroe Neighborhood Association, neither supporting nor opposing, available to answer questions. Dean Schrader, 1909 West Lawn Avenue, in support, not wishing to speak. Robert Keller, 448 West Washington, in support, not wishing to speak. Jordan Corning, 1714 Roberts Court, opposed, not wishing to speak. L. Endress, 1600 Block, Monroe Street, opposed, not wishing to speak. Jera Bodley, 809 Grant Street, opposed, not wishing to speak. Melissa Tanner Wallace, 1820 Keyes Avenue, in support, not wishing to speak. Josh Napravnik, 656 Crandall Street, in support, not wishing to speak. Rachel Fields, 656 Crandall Street, in support, not wishing to speak. Cole Goldman, 1910 Keyes Avenue, in support, not wishing to speak. James Hargood, 716 Edgewood Avenue, in support, not wishing to speak. And finally, Mark Smith, 1911 Monroe Street, neither supporting nor opposing. Are there questions for any of the registrants before I close the public hearing? Mr. Rui, and for whom?
For the developer. Question on fencing, the plans show fencing.
Why don't you wait until they get up here and prepared to answer? The clock's off, you can take your time.
There's a question on fencing or wall or something from 1719 South Spooner. And I notice your fencing does not have any east-west segment, say between the house that you bought and that person's house. Would you extend that fencing along that property?
We have a shared driveway right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We wouldn't be able to put a fence down the property line, otherwise it would restrict access for them and for us to our own driveways, but we'd certainly be willing to work with them to figure out a configuration that works.
Wow.
It is proposed to be, it's probably a solid wood and metal fence. It's not a masonry wall, which is not something we'd be able to do. Right now, there is a fence in the exact same location.
I guess I was looking for at least a piece
Yeah, we'd be happy to look at that.
along the east end of that property line, at least get it so that the parking lot is screened from the neighbor's house.
Yeah, we can look at that. I guess I'd be happy to look at exactly what you're talking with and point it out, and then meet with the neighbor as well.
Okay. The other question, I see that Alder Eskridge has got two of my questions covered. I appreciate that, and the memo I got from her. And the other question is, because I haven't heard a clarification, if you'd accept a statement that no part of your building would be more than 6 feet from any property line?
Is that correct, Brian? We can agree to that? Yep.
Be no less than.
Oh, wait, no, never mind. Just
Because I haven't got a clear clarification on that one corner that abuts.
got a yes.
Yeah.
That abuts
Yes.
1719. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Alder King.
Just really quickly, so we can avoid doing this later, so Alder Eskridge did email us some additional conditions, and
Go
so
ahead.
assuming you've talked with her, and I'm sure she's gonna talk, but I just want from you, are you okay with all of those things?
Yes, I believe they're the same conditions that were with us at the
Right.
last meeting, and we
Yeah.
had previewed those, and we are okay with those conditions. Thank you.
Just double checking, thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Anyone else for Ms. Morrison while she's up here? And thank you again.
Thank you.
Alder Eskridge, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time tonight and for seeing this project again. As you know, the timing of this project, should you choose to approve it, is incredibly important. So I really do appreciate your procedural hurdles that you've gone through. So I actually had to write down this weekend my own little diatribe that I went on in my house. My husband was like, you need to write that down and stop, complaining to me about it and put it on paper. And it really was this idea that I feel very strongly that you should support this project. And I feel that way because I know that the neighborhood feels that way. And I felt like at the last meeting, that wasn't being heard by the Plan Commission. And my neighbors have really shocked me tonight. So thank you all for showing up. Unfortunately, I guess I would say, and I'm taking this up with the governance committee on Thursday night too, but they shouldn't have to show up on a Monday night to share these comments in person. Yes, it's great when people do that, but these people had sent emails in, and at least for me, when someone contacts me, whether it's an in-person or via email or via phone call, that feedback is equally important because we all have different situations in our lives that make it possible for us to show up to meetings or not. And if we privilege people that can show up to meetings and their feedback, we aren't being accountable as policymakers. So I so appreciate my neighbors who showed up here tonight. Thank you all very, very much. But I also appreciate everyone who sent in feedback in advance and has called me and emailed on this project and participated in neighborhood meetings and felt like their feedback was heard at that time and didn't need to continue to show up to meetings. So the only additional things that I would say when it comes to what was said here tonight, I just wrote down a handful of things that I wanted to clarify that came up in comments. Just to kind of make sure that neighbors who are maybe still feeling uncomfortable about this project have a little bit more information. One of these actually do fit with a lot of the reasons that I feel comfortable with this project. The zoning here is not changing. The zoning of this site is planned development, and they're not asking for a zoning change. It would continue to be a planned development, but that does create, this new process. So there's not a zoning change being asked for tonight. There was a transportation analysis that was done, and it was seen in that analysis that there wasn't a significant change in impact for this new proposed use from the current use. So we don't anticipate a huge influx of new traffic demands on this site. And though I do completely appreciate, as a neighbor who also lives close to this project, how challenging that intersection is, we worked with traffic engineering to try to see if there was anything we could do to improve the intersection during this project. And there really wasn't anything that fixes the issues that we all know about when we come up to this intersection, which is just how the streets intersect. So this project can't fix the kind of crummy alignment of that intersection that's in place. We did look at it. The other pieces that I just feel are outside of our purview as policymakers are related to the cost of the real estate transaction. I just have felt really uncomfortable with that as it's come up in some of the discussions in the neighborhood, and hope that the assumption that some neighbors are making about the cost related to the height of this project is not something that comes up in your decision making, because I think it's inappropriate for us to make assumptions about that. And the last piece that I will address is the idea of the flooding. So there has been some significant stormwater issues in this area in recent years, and the Monroe Street reconstruction project, the engineers are aware of that, and they have addressed, or they're hoping to address it in their new storm sewers that they're putting in as part of the Monroe Street reconstruction. So hopefully this project, it isn't taking away any permeable pavement right now, so hopefully it won't contribute more, and actually the situation will just be further improved in the area because of the Monroe Street reconstruction project and the new storm sewers that are going in as part of that unrelated but very related construction project. So without further comments, I did send around again the conditions of approval that I'm asking that if you choose to approve this project, you attach. And they really do get to some of the specific concerns that I heard from the near neighbors about venting and exhaust and some of those really detailed things that I do believe are very important to quality of life when you live near a project like this. So I hope you take those into account. And support the project that's before you this evening with the changes that have been proposed. I think it's an incredibly strong project, and I think in a couple of years we'll all be very, very proud to have this new addition to our neighborhood. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the input process or the public dialogue that I've heard as the alder.
Questions for Alder Eskridge? Seeing none. Alder Zellers?
I have a question for staff, if now's the time.
Okay, I can't remember if I closed the public hearing or not. If I didn't, I did, thank you. Then questions for staff are now appropriate. Alder Zellers?
Okay, I'm going to try to describe what my issue is, which will be followed with a question. You know, one of our things to look at is conformance with adopted plans. And the comprehensive plan says that buildings are generally recommended to be between 2 and 4 stories in height, and the plan notes that more specific height standards may be recommended in adopted neighborhood plans. Then in the, or corridor plans or whatever, and so then the Monroe Street commercial district plans indicates no building on Monroe Street should exceed 4 stories for the entire length of the street. The PD district standard of approval says that the PD district shall facilitate the development or redevelopment goals of the comprehensive plan and adopted neighborhood corridor or special area plans. And there's something similar in terms of consistency with comprehensive plan in the zoning map and demolition. My question is, I know that we faced something similar to this in a development proposal in District 2. And as a result of that, we went through a process of changing, amending the neighborhood plan so that we would not have this kind of situation of inconsistency. And I'm wondering, you know, kind of like why we might not have done that if we think that this is an appropriate height, and not having done that, how it's possible for us to find it consistent with plans, acknowledging there's some wonderful things about this and that the Associated Bank is going to be redeveloped, all those kinds of things. But that's what I am struggling with in terms of consistency with plans.
Great question. I'll draw a couple distinctions between the proposal or the building that I think you're referring to in District 2. Was it by Reynolds Park?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So in this case, and this was approved a few years ago by the Plan Commission, our neighborhood plan and comprehensive plan had a recommendation for parkland on a property within District 2, adjacent to Reynolds Park. The parks staff, did not foresee this being an acquisition anytime in the near future and had actually recommended against that plan recommendation for the property. That said, we felt when a development proposal came through for that property that the proposal was so out of line with the plan recommendation for the property. It was a high-density residential proposal proposed for a site recommended for parkland. We felt that necessitated a plan amendment in order to find a way to support that development moving forward, and worked for several months with actually a different developer than was the developer who actually implemented the project in later years. We worked with the neighborhood association on an amendment to that plan that would change the recommendation for that large property, half a block from park to high-density residential. So in that case, it was a pretty substantial difference between the plan recommendation and the proposed development. In this case, staff has laid out in our January 22nd report some concerns about inconsistencies with the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan. And also, we do believe that if the Plan Commission were to approve this project, there would be no concern about a consistency issue with our city's comprehensive plan. I think between 4 and 5 stories can be debatable by the Plan Commission. Again, staff does have concerns with height and elements of the proposal that are inconsistent with that Monroe Street Commercial District Plan. But the magnitude of difference between the plan recommendation and the proposal before you tonight does not concern staff with regard to statutory requirements to maintain consistency with the comprehensive plan. I think we're close enough to what the comprehensive plan recommendation is, and that's the plan that we need to look at for that consistency requirement.
So you're saying that it's the comprehensive plan rather than the commercial district plan, and why would that be?
In this case, they are equivalent. Both the comprehensive plan and the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan have a general recommendation for 2 to 4 stories along Monroe Street. As former Alder Carr mentioned during her testimony, there is no recommendation for redevelopment of this specific site in the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan. Staff is comfortable, rolling this site into the general 2 to 4 story recommendation within the Monroe Street Commercial District Plan. And we do note in our January 22nd report, there is an opportunity in that Monroe Street Commercial District Plan for the Plan Commission to approve greater height if certain conditions are met. Creative design and presentation, consideration of the contextual impact, the lot size, the proximity to other building forms, setbacks, stepbacks. These are all things that the Plan Commission is considering with regard to the question of whether the building as proposed is consistent with that plan.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Rui?
Thank you. I had a question on the balcony dimensions, depth and width minimum requirements.
Yes, I believe the minimum depth of a balcony is 4.5 feet in the zoning code, and so the 5 foot depth here does conform with that.
Probably not related to this project, but has staff considered increasing the depth requirements to make in the zoning code to make balconies more usable?
Has staff considered that? I don't think it's been discussed at any recent staff meetings that I can recall.
Put it on our list.
Okay.
Anyone else? Then a motion, Mr. Cantrell?
Sure. Thanks. I will move, and again, this is a tough one, as I said last time, but I will move that the Plan Commission find this proposal consistent with the Monroe Street Plan and the plan development standards, specifically Plan Development Standard B, which suggests that we should promote mixed-use land uses, residential, commercial, along corridors, especially transit corridors, and the objective F, which also talks about facilitation of high-quality development. And if I get a second, I'll elaborate on the Monroe Street Plan and this project.
I presume your motion includes Alder Eskrich's
Yes, 4
ideas
conditions which she suggested, and also Commissioner Rui's fence along the north line of 625 South Spooner, generally from the rear of the house to the east property line, and for the purposes of screening that the development's parking
and the
lot.
6 feet.
Excuse me?
The 6 feet.
And that no building above grade is less than 6 feet from the north property line.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Pilevsky. Mr. Cantrell.
Yeah. The Monroe Street plan, as Ms. Stoddard pointed out, does provide some flexibility. It talks about 4 stories, but there is basically, as some of the speakers did indicate as well, that there's no absolutes, and that the project should be considered on a case-by-case basis. I believe, because of the superior architecture of this project and the quality of the development, that the 5 stories, especially since it has a step back on the 5th floor, is quite appropriate for this site. And there's not going to be a lot of sites. I think this is probably the last site that we'll see of any significant height that this building could reach on Monroe Street, because we don't have any large properties. Associated Bank is one of the largest single properties we have. The other properties are very small, subdivided properties with smaller businesses. So I think that this will probably be the last property of this scale that we'll see. And also, I believe that it fits into the neighborhood. And we need density where it's appropriate. And Monroe Street, especially at this site, is, I believe, where it's appropriate, where Madison is a growing community. This is an area of Madison that people want to live. And having some additional retail, I think, is very appropriate and will provide pedestrian section of commercial uses, which I think this stretch of Monroe Street needs. So for that reason and many, many others, I think that this is an appropriate project for this site at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Stoddard?
Yes, just wanted to ask, just for clarification, as the commission acts on this, to clarify which elements of the revisions we're looking to approve this evening. Want to make sure that the revisions that were made, that we have clarity on which version is moving forward.
Sure. The revisions that I think that are quite appropriate are the revisions to the northeast section of the project, which lessens the intrusion into the 45-degree. I am less, I guess, interested in the removal of the 2-foot from the first floor, the clear story. I think that having that additional 2 feet at the pedestrian level, where the businesses are provided that clear story, will make the building more architecturally interesting and also provide the pedestrian area a much more pleasing project. So I would basically keep that additional 2 feet at that location. Reducing the building by 2 feet, I don't think matters at all.
Does the commission feel that keeping the 2-foot clerestory windows in is friendly? Yes. Okay, so without objection, that's part of the main motion. Anything else, Mr. Cantrell?
And let's see.
We can get back to you.
Yeah, I think that, Ms. Stoddard, is there any, I know those were the two changes that I remember that they made.
There were changes to the 5th floor and the depth of the setback.
Yes, I'm very supportive of that. I think that will reduce the scale of the 5th floor, which is good. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Berger?
Hi. I would agree. I think that the key improvement that has occurred between last week and this week is the removal of that chunk from the back corner that does provide something a lot closer to the 45-degree angle that we have, that's has been part of the zoning for most, all other developments that have developed along Monroe Street and this one. And I would quibble a little bit with when Alder Eskridge said that this is not a rezoning, because one of the things about this that made it tough is it is actually a rezoning of the residential property that abuts the commercial property. So it is eating into the neighborhood by one lot. And anytime that we do have a planned development, this is a different SIP, a different implementation plan. It's a different plan. This isn't Associated Bank anymore. So I do think that, I stand by our decision last week, or whatever, 4 weeks ago, and I will be supporting the motion on the table tonight, because I do think that that improvement has been made, which is something. I think that they could have done better, and they came back and they did do better. I think that the fact that the property that it abuts the residential house on Stockton Street, even though that goes outside of a typical side yard setback, I think that that makes sense based on wanting to keep the driveway apron and keep the traffic flow and all of those things. And I guess I would just also say that it does make these decisions a lot easier when we do have clarity and plans, and it's not, these meetings I don't think they shouldn't be popularity contests necessarily, but when there is great community enthusiasm for ideas, I guess I would just request of the neighbors who are, standing behind these wonderful, in my opinion, wonderful ideals of accommodating growth, sustainability, density, transit-oriented design, to keep pushing for those things in our plans. We are in the process of updating our comprehensive plan. It sounds like the neighborhood plan may be slightly out of date. If these things were in place, it would make our jobs as plan commissioners a lot easier to approve projects when they come to us. So that's all.
Thank you. Alder Zeller's next.
I would really like to second what Commissioner Berger had to say, both about the changes made, which I do believe have improved this, and also, and that's why I ask about the plan amendment, because it would make things much easier when we get here if it was clear consistency with plans. The other thing that I would comment on that, and this was in place the last time, but that makes it a bit easier, and it's not real easy for me to go with this, because I do think that there's a question about consistency with plans, is that it is not demolishing a swath of homes. It's a property that everybody agrees is going to be and should be redeveloped. And for me, that makes a big difference. And I know someone said they didn't like the term character, but this does not diminish really by those kinds of demolitions, diminish the character really of this Monroe Street neighborhood, and that really does make a difference to me in this project. So I will be supporting it, even though it's not totally easy for me.
Thank you, Alder Zellers. Mr. Polewski.
Thank you. I'd like to say that one of the changes that I found most appealing in this revision is the addition of the balconies on the right side of the north elevation. I like the symmetry with that block down the block there. And I like the idea that there is outdoor living for people in those particular living units. I would like to say that I think that this is entirely consistent with the intent of the comprehensive plan. And on that basis, I'm very grateful to Ms. Stoddard for pointing out how the consistency in the context of this plan with the underlying comprehensive plan and neighborhood plan really fits in. I think the clarification of the staff comments on how this is inconsistent with the plan is extremely useful. I am particularly grateful to the community for coming out and pointing out that the world has changed a lot since the time that the neighborhood plan was put in place in the first place, and for former Alder Carr for pointing out the thought process difference between then and now. I think this is a good project, and I'm happy to be able to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rui?
Thank you. I'm one of those that supported the 6 stories at Hotel Red because I consider that as part of the Regent Street corridor. This one's troubled me, the extra story. I came here with the intent probably I'd be voting against it. But I like all the other improvements that have been put into it, and including adding the 2 feet back in that Mr. Cantrell put back in, because architecturally that makes it look much better. So I'm going to be voting in support. My only concern is that was a great parking spot for women's volleyball games, and now it's gonna go away.
Thank you, Mr. Rui. Mr. Oath?
Thank you. I also am going to support the project. I'm not going to reiterate. I think all the comments have been made in support, and I agree 100% with them. I do want to make the comment that this neighborhood is simply a great neighborhood to live in and to grow up in, and I think that's evidenced by the number of people who came tonight and expressed their concerns either for or against this project. But I also want to say that part of this draw for this neighborhood is the fact that people can walk and bike and just simply go to the neighborhood businesses that are up and down Monroe Street. And I think studies have shown, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alderman Eskers, is that studies have shown that the neighborhood itself cannot support the sustainability of these businesses. So I think projects like this, I think, are very good because they increase the density and they bring the vitality of new people into that neighborhood for the commercial district also, as well as the neighborhood to live in. It's a great neighborhood to live in, and I think that that's very much on. So I just want to say I support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I want to thank the applicants for their nimbleness and flexibility of working with the neighbors on, a fairly quick turnaround. But I especially want to salute the neighbors. Great neighborhoods don't happen by accident. This just didn't happen. It happened because people who live there believe strongly in what they want, and they have obviously been really eloquent about it, and we do our part too. And I think that we have just reached a successful conclusion for an addition to this neighborhood, which will continue to be great going forward. So, thank you. With that, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Passes unanimously. Oh, I also want to salute the young people who came out tonight. I thought that was an especially wonderful addition, young adults and not adults. It was just a great addition to the faces we usually see here. Thank you. Motion to adjourn, Mr. Rui, seconded by Alder King. All those in favor say aye. We are adjourned.